Because I would stress, I did see this point where Sam Altman said that consciousness is something that emanates from material. And we didn't know that before AI. I mean, he's basically just smoking his own weed and blowing sunshine up everyone's ass at this point to, promote a higher valuation, et cetera. That's incorrect, like fundamentally incorrect. The world is a manifestation of consciousness. Consciousness becomes before the world. You might not agree with me there. I am a kind of Kantian in a way, as was Schopenhauer, Nietzsche, and others. So the world is a bunch of buzzing atoms and electrons and radiation and et cetera. Due to your senses that developed at some point, due to a certain kind of mindedness, your own perception, you're able to create a world where you see a computer standing right here, a microphone right here. I recognize that that image of JF represents a human being living in Canada, and et cetera, et cetera. That's only through your own consciousness. Therefore, there's no intelligence as we understand it out there. That there's an intelligence of sorts. There's not an intelligence in the sense that we understand it out there. Consciousness precedes the material world, in fact. And if you're perceiving some sort of intelligence in a machine, you're ultimately perceiving your own consciousness. And so all of your own problems are going to manifest themselves in the real world. Your own ideology is going to manifest yourself in that computer, and you're going to pretend that it is, artificial intelligence or something like that. What do you think about that? I'm taking a bit of a radical position with the consciousness precedes reality. Consciousness precedes materiality as well.
Yeah, I mean, I don't agree with idealism. I think that the thing is, idealism is true about your experience of the world. It is the prior thing and the only thing that you can be sure of, the cogito of Descartes, and then you can start interacting with the world. So as far as the truth that will be exposed to your conscious self, what you say is kind of true internally. But the reality is your consciousness has arisen from matter. The one place I agree with you is that Sam Altman is misrepresenting this. We know this before freaking OpenAI shows up and ChatGPT shows up. But leaving that aside, the material world is sufficient, and the feelings that you have are in it. They supervene in it, and they exist from it. I don't know if you would agree with this statement, at least as a common statement of us.
I don't. I understand what you're saying. Where did consciousness come from? We're in a kind of infinite regress, problem of who invented God, or similar to that in that sense. I would probably take a Kantian way out of that and say that is a point where our knowledge, that is the point where knowledge becomes impossible. We can only understand the world through our sensual apparatus, through the way that we're minded, that we have nostrils and a mouth and eyes and ears, etc. We don't perceive the radio waves, but a radio can perceive the radio waves, if you understand. There's a certain mindedness that allows you to understand reality, and you can't move beyond that. So understand, once we reflect upon our own, our own mind, the structure of our own minds, we fully can kind of like understand where knowledge ends, and that you can't know that. You can't, at the end of the day, understand how consciousness does arise out of material. And I will grant you that, what you're saying fundamentally does make sense. Where did consciousness come from? But we can never know that, and thus for us, and if for all intents and purposes, consciousness precedes the material world.
I mean,
I am a German idealist. I think German idealism is just correct, and it's
the thing is, consciousness.
I wish we could create a German idealist computer. I mean, that would.
It's just surprising how consciousness seems to always arise in little babies with little craniums, and if you spray them with drugs, it disappears. It does seem that consciousness is contained in the brain.
In the brain?
Yeah, it does seem that if I mess with your brain, I mess with your consciousness.
Right. So, yeah, I understand that. I mean, I would say there's a certain consciousness in the spinal cord and the electrical system.
I mean, all of it. We don't know of anything else than what's in the brain in terms of subjective experience.
If you cut my head off, I won't have consciousness. If you cut my hand off, I would. That's a fair point.
Absolutely.
What do you think it is?
Well, it means that our consciousness is a product of the sum or sum of parts of the atoms and their electrical connections and their chemical connections in our mind. In the same way, if I zap my computer, my Windows desktop disappears. And so I like the metaphor of the Windows desktop for consciousness, because the Windows desktop is a 2D space. I can see it and experience it as a 2D space, but if it boils down to its physical basis in the CPU of my computer, it's not really a 2D space. It's a bunch of electrical signals and wires. And yes, the consciousness is the same. It's a virtual creation like the Windows desktop, by a circuit that exists in the human brain, and it's there because it was better to have this evolutionarily than not have it.
How do you answer the question of uniqueness? consciousness being unique and a single perspective from a single person. If you were to duplicate someone, if you were to carbon copy someone's brain atom for atom, would you be able to experience consciousness through that brain? Would it be the exact same consciousness but separate?
If the copy was perfect, I would believe that the consciousnesses are perfect and that they would both feel that they are the legitimate JF if you perfectly copy. Now, from there, they might diverge. From there, they would experience a new world where they have to accommodate the other JF and the fact that, oh yeah, starting from that point, I grew into another being.
But just because it can't occupy the same space, even if you lived in the same room, but you're still not occupying the same space, you don't have the exact same experience.
Yeah, it would seem like it's not just matter, but it's also space and maybe another dimension or something like that. If I want
But when I say matter, I include all of this. Yes, I include all physical laws, basically.
Well, that's cheating because, I mean, saying you include everything is like, that's the ultimate win.
No, not everything possible, but every physical law that we know of. What I mean basically by my physicalism in philosophy of mind is that I'm not a dualist. I don't believe there's something in some other universe that implements my consciousness and somehow interacts with it through my brain. I believe it's all there. That's the goods. And if you copy them, you would have someone feeling like JF.
But that's obviously not correct. Like if you were able to clone yourself and, which is certainly possible, right? And you put that person in a different situation, they're not going to understand himself. He's not going to understand himself as JF.
No, but let's use the correct words.
Totally different.
Let's use the correct terminology here. Cloning would be creating another being with another history. It would live a life history that is different, would have a different name. What I'm talking about here is 3D printing of all physicality elements. So if you were to 3D print my brain as it stands at one instant, that would be a copy of me that feels like me.
So it would also have the memories, essentially.
Yeah, it would have the memories.
Yeah, he's suggesting a situation where the copy JF has undergone the decades of learning and synaptic pruning, and it's basically an exact learning copy, effectively. Then again, once you do create this copy, then there would be a divergence in their learning, right? They're taking in a slightly different data set. So, yeah.
But it still would not be your content. You wouldn't be seeing through the eyes of that person.
Oh yeah, totally. If you were to put us in a black room such that neither of us knows who's the copy and who's the original, we wouldn't know. We would spend the rest of our life wondering which one was the original one.
In some ways, it's almost impossible to prove this because in an experiment, time is obviously required to create the experiment, which in turn makes it impossible to use time as a dimension in the experiment. So it's kind of like you'd never really be able to test this out, even on a small
disagree.
Scale.
In principle, totally provable. We just have to have a precise enough 3D printer, do the printing of one human, and there you go. You'll have your answer in their reaction.
Yeah. Okay. So I think we might think of time a little bit differently. You're saying time is an experience, like the time it takes to experience things. I'm saying time in like a real dimension. Like if you were to have a Cartesian coordinate system, X, Y, Z, and then you have time. So in other words, time is a fabric that is also a part of the equation as much as anything else, as much as a molecule is. So that's what I mean when I say time, and that's why I say that you can't really duplicate it in a sense where time is an element you can use in the experiment because time is ever passing. You can't perfectly replicate something in the same time, which is why I don't think that consciousness is just purely material. I think there's something else there that we don't understand. I think to assert that, when Altman asserts that it's material, to say that if we just build, enough silicon chips and we connect them all together, then therefore we have consciousness. I think they're missing an element. And even if he's right as far as that, it's still missing something, I believe.
There may be technical issues, but in principle, I don't see the problem. You could have a 3D printer that is so fast in principle that it does an instant copying.
I mean, we're all arguing around the concept of a soul. Is there something else besides synapses and brain matter and the electrical system of your spinal cord and so on? It's very hard. I think it's very hard for all of us to almost think outside of the soul. To be fair, we all imagine that there's just some special fairy dust or something that gives us consciousness.
I think genes themselves.
It was very easy for the young scientist JF rolling a joint and experiencing all these weird effects on my consciousness and realizing, wow, just different molecules in my blood change the way I feel. Therefore, it's all in my brain.